what does your day look like? I mean, are you waking up with the idea of songwriting? Is it like you get an idea at a random time and you run into your space and try and log it? Like, how does that work for you?
So, I mean, the ideas come in varying times. I've had like recently, which hasn't happened in a long time, but I had like melodies in a dream. I woke up and like frantically tried to like capture that thing again, which has been cool. But most of the time, it's me like being not able to write or work and like going to the grocery store and like humming into my phone this stupid kick pattern that I heard, or like something that's tweaking, going and like rattling in my brain, and then going to the computer and like trying to recreate it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of 2020. I'm Siobhán Cronin here with Ben and Cory, and we are back for part 2 with my friend and bandmate, Cory Juba, newest member of Starset. As we've said, we've kind of collected them all. We've got all the Pokemon in the bag, so
this one was fun. This one was fun because Cory is he's not only an incredible musician, but he also is into the audio engineering, producing, and all that stuff, which Ben and I also dabble in a little bit. So we got to kind of nerd out a little bit, which is always enjoyable for me. And I think people it'll be cool to get a perspective on his songwriting process and his writing and how he approaches music and visualizes music a little bit more in this episode.
And if you're a producer or like you record your own tunes, like this guy is awesome. He really knows what it's like to be a guy that does everything. I mean, he plays so many different instruments, and you can tell like he just hears it in his head. And that's an amazing thing in a composer, and what he's bringing to Starset, considering he plays like, everything.
So check it out. Like and subscribe at 2020-d.com, and stay tuned right now for part 2 with Cory Juba.
Cory!
Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to another episode of 2020. Cory here with Siobhán and Ben as always, and we are super pumped to welcome back Cory Juba. And now we share the same first name and spelling, and the letters, 4 letters of the last name. Both wear glasses, both are bald, both have a beard. So we both like music a little bit. So
check out the YouTube cast for the visual. We're all like, all 4 of us kind of twinning. I need to like pull my hair back. We got the glasses going, the headphones.
I am wearing my contacts as well, so I'm gonna absolutely. I feel drunk already from doing that. So that was just for a bit.
All right. Well, I'll relieve you of the responsibility of talking while you come back too. But anyway, we're excited to have you back for part 2. We got into a lot of your background and joining Starset. So for anyone that didn't hear that, go back and listen. Especially if you're a Starset fan, a lot of fun conversation about the new song and how Cory talked to Dustin and got into the band. So this episode,
you don't want to just tell them to save the time, and that if you want to be a keyboard player in Starset, just learn how to sweep pick.
Yeah, just play everything, and then you.
I think the answer is you have to be multifaceted and able to just handle a lot of random things happening, like key changes on the fly and multiple instruments and technology. And I mean, even me, I remember like some of my early experiences in Starset and hearing like DMX controller and Ableton and the time code, and I was like, what are all of these words that I don't know? And I was just like, yeah, okay, the string player that was used to reading sheet music. And lo and behold, now years later, I've taken classes and learned from all of you guys. And yeah, it really is kind of essential to have some of those skills, and it's hard to get along without it in a lot of ways. And
yeah, I think it's helpful. That's like very much like Dustin's mentality about the band too, is very DIY and like do it yourselves. Anything that he can do himself, he wants to do and like be able to do. Even like in terms of management now, like we're trying to be more self-sufficient and take this upon ourselves to handle it, which is really cool. And I think like building those skill sets is important. Like we know how our system works, we know like what our limits are and what our constraints are, and like how to push ourselves. So I think, being self-sufficient and a quick learner is definitely a skill set you can bring to anything.
Yeah, well, and that's interesting you brought that up, because that's one thing we talk about at the show. So we're doing the acoustic tour right now for anyone that didn't hear the last episode. But in this case in particular, this is all like self-booked. So Ron, who has also been on the show, he's the bass player in the band, basically put this whole tour together. So it wasn't like agents and promoters, and it's literally completely DIY, like show up at various venues that are anywhere from like a regular venue to a small restaurant or brewery. And it's like, okay, we're going to find a space. And yeah, he did all the routing, all the logistics, all the booking. So it really, from beginning to end was like self-sustaining kind of.
He did fix the bus today too, by the way.
So every day there's some mechanical thing that Ron is doing. So listen to his episode.
Yeah, it's incredible. We talked a little bit in the first episode, about your interests in the more technical side, the audio engineering, studio work. And if anyone's made it through the first episode, they probably care enough to stick around if we get a little nerdy. So can you talk a little bit about how you got into that side of the music business?
Well, so I growing up, like playing guitar and like when starting taking it seriously, I always had like little ways, like little recorders, I think things to capture my ideas and moments. And then I became increasingly more frustrated with how terrible they sounded. So I kind of just wanted my demos to get better and better. And I took it upon myself to dive into the tech world, which is easy for me because like I love the creative aspect, but I definitely love technology, and like my right brain, my scientific analytical thinking is there. So when I understood like the beginnings of like compression and EQ, I was like gears started turning, and I understood like how you can use these tools to pull out more emotion in your music and balances. So I guess like the initial thing just came from the drive of wanting my demos to be not shit. Like I really want to sound good.
It's a common motivator, I think especially probably for like our generation, where we couldn't, like we were at the time when we were young, studios are expensive. There was no chance of like going in to do your demos or anything. So it was either that or find the kid in your neighborhood that had a 4-track and he sucked at it. So it's like, all right, maybe I can do this a little better. And you kind of have to start figuring out stuff for yourself.
Totally. Also, like we're in this perfect time where all these tools are so accessible now, and like I probably wouldn't have understood compression in the same way if I had to go find like a super nice LA2A and like, have access to it all the time. But
how are you learning about that though? Like was this internet research? Because I mean, even for me, it takes me like signing up for a Berklee class to even begin to understand audio things like compression. So how are you learning this stuff?
I guess, this is a skill that I just assume people like have this drive, I guess, but I'm self-taught with everything. Like, all of my music knowledge, I think I had 2 guitar lessons in my life. And that's pretty much it. So like YouTube's an insane resource, but I'm constantly reading. I bought like all the mixing books I could find and then went through them and, spent too many hours on forums, like, the old Andy Sneap forum and things like that. And basically just digesting any sort of resource I could. So,
okay, let me ask you this then. So, because you seem pretty serious about the audio engineering thing. When was the first time you plugged something into something and you said, "Holy crap"? Because I could tell. I'll start with me.
Good holy crap or bad holy crap?
A good holy crap. Because I'll start with me. So I borrowed 3 condenser microphones meant for a choir from my high school and plugged them into a Roland VS 1680. Yeah. And it was 24-bit. It was the first hard disk recorder, and it had phantom power. I put it in front of my friend's drum set, and I heard all these frequencies I'd never heard on my 4-track before. And I was like, oh my God, I can make this sound like Pantera.
Sure.
Yeah. What was that first moment for you? Where you believed in it, that you could be that guy that could make the record.
Got it. Okay. So it wasn't, I don't know about being the first moment, but some of the most potent moments I've had was my friend Eric, who used to be in a band with, had a studio in Ohio, and a pretty nice one. Like, his parents really shelled out and built like a really cool room for us to play in. And we would just, toss up mics on the kit and listen back in the control room, and they sucked at first. And then I remember distinctly, like we had this awesome like Mesa triple rec amp and this incredible like Marshall 4x12 cab, and I figured out like the perfect spot on the cone, or at least an acceptable spot on the cone to capture the guitar sound in the other room. And I remember coming back and I was like, this sounds mean. I sound like I had attitude. This is cool. And I just remember feeling like, wow, like these are the tools that you required to do it. But I remember just feeling finally like recording a high gain tube head and then like chugging and like doing like a false harmonic and then coming back and like listening to it and being like, that's me? What? And then being pretty stoked. And then, that it's just a starting point. Like you see that and you're like, oh, it's cool, but like I need more punch in the kick, and then like the snare's not right. And I can't even tell you how many years I spend like sculpting snare drums to get them Right. So,
so let me ask you this: what percentage of your tracks have high pass filters on them?
What's the real answer? 90, 90%. But they're not super aggressive. Depends. But I'm not afraid.
He's referencing a previous guest we had.
We had Jonathan Weiner, who's a world-acclaimed mastering engineer, and I actually went out to dinner with him after that. We went to go see Jeff Beck, and I said, after the episode, I had to go take off all my high-pass filters. And then the first thing he said without missing a beat is, well, don't believe everything you hear.
Yeah, so I started doing that out of, I guess, habit. Using, EQs, it's really easy to see what information's there. But then I heard this awesome interview with Joe Barresi, who did Tool, and all these huge iconic rock records, and they have such a big sound. He's like, I don't high pass anything, and I was like, on the guitars, and he's has so much low end. He goes, yeah, don't do it at all. So I was like, what am I doing this for?
Well, sometimes it works, but here, that's the thing is, and you learn this. So, I remember the first time I went into a real studio with a real producer, and he said, "Could you give me an audio reference of what you want to sound like on your guitar?" And I had a VHT and a Bogner. I had these beautiful amps. We had a Matchless over there. And I play Pantera, Vulgar Display of Power, and he just goes, "Why do you hate mids?" He's like, what do you want me to do? Get a crappy Marshall valve state? He was literally horrified. We're at this beautiful studio, Longview Farm Studios, with all these U47 microphones, and I'm like, can we get the metal MT2 Metal Zone in here, and get the Dimebag Darrell sound? So it's always but it worked for Pantera, because if now you listen to the drums, it's all high end, and so that and Rex Brown is where the vocal should be, is where the bass is. Right. So you're like, but that works because they're just an anomaly. And that's when you realize that sometimes for some people using a high pass filter is perfect, and other times it sounds like Tool.
It's so situational. And one thing that I learned, because I'm also for production wise, I'm almost 100% self-taught, and watching other engineers I know, looking over their shoulder, hey, what'd you do there? But one thing that happens when you do a lot of your own stuff, when you're learning to produce your own stuff and mix your own stuff, you're producing garbage, and then you're trying to mix the garbage. So you're using all sorts of tools that, the guy doing Tool, he's receiving these tracks that were recorded and arranged so perfectly that there's no need to go in and do all this crazy stuff. Whereas, when I'm 15, putting a mic, a 57 in front of this cab, just slapping it on the speaker, and I'm getting all this speaker rumble. Yeah, I'm going to have to high pass it out because I have no idea what I'm doing. So it's funny, it's so dependent, and that it's, kind of comes down. If anyone tells you always do this or never do this, then you throw that out the window and you stop listening to that person immediately, because it's so context dependent. But the important part, I think, is how important the arrangement is in production, because if you have the space for all that low end in the guitar because you've actually planned it out, then yeah, you can leave all that information in there. But if you are in Lost Symphony and you have 500 tracks of just absolute anarchy, yeah, you might have to high pass the guitars a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's never an always or never sort of situation. But I will say, there's this awesome YouTube show called Pensado's Place.
Oh yeah. I just told Siobhán and Brock about that.
So they always ask, how do you approach this? So what do you do when you have to use this? And the answer always is, no matter who the guest is, it depends. So, and it does. Right. Everything is conditional, and you have to treat your source material different, all the time. So. But I think doing things out of habit is not very good. You have to understand why you're doing these moves. Which
it's like going to a house painter. What color do you paint houses? Which one? It's it doesn't any trade like that where it's it's you don't just show up and go, I'm gonna boost 5K to get some clarity. It's just, what if you're the person that recorded it, added that in, and all these compression and EQ and stuff. So yeah, it's funny the journey that you have to take when you are teaching yourself this stuff, which is, it doesn't seem like it, but it's engineering. It's audio engineering. It's right in the title. Sure. So there's a lot of stuff going on there that, a lot of bedroom producers go I want my kick drum to be the size of a house, and I also want to hear my vocals clear as day, and I also want the subs and 808s to be as loud as possible. And they go, why doesn't this work?
Can I tell you something that I feel like you guys will appreciate nerding out? So this weekend, I went and hung out with Keith Wallen from Breaking Benjamin, your friend Keith.
Yeah.
Freaking amazing dude. Totally took awesome care of me. Went and saw Bush, Breaking Benjamin, and Alice in Chains. Yeah. So I'm hanging out backstage because Keith is the man, and Micah Inez, who's one of my heroes, who played on Ozzy Osbourne's No More Tears and then got stolen away by Alice in Chains. He had the sickest sound ever. In fact, the sound guy was probably a little bit light on Jerry Cantrell, and I noticed like there was this insane, rumbling, distorted, crazy bass, and it sounded so fucking mean. It was like I've always thought Mike Inez had one of the greatest bass sounds. In fact, the bass tone on Alice in Chains on Unplugged from MTV is probably the best acoustic bass sound in the history of time. But anyway, so this guy's backstage and he's talking to Chris from Fishman, and he's talking and he kind of looks at me. He goes, "Yeah, so what I'm doing is I'm trying to distort only certain frequencies. So I know where Jerry's sitting at, and I know where like the vocals are sitting at. So I found those frequencies that they're not at, and I only distort those. So there's no frequency cancellation." And I'm like, holy shit. First off, I found the smartest bass player in the entire world. But then I was like, wow, that sound like why it sounds so sick is because the distortion is only living.
Yeah.
Where the rest of the band is not living. And I'm like, that's why Mike Inez has the most killer bass sound in history. And it sits right on top of Jerry Cantrell like no big deal.
Yeah, multi-band saturation is so cool. I love doing this. There's like amazing plugin for it that's like it makes it so simple. It's called Saturn.
Saturn. Do you have Saturn 2?
Yeah, of course. But it's like that's one of the best tools ever, especially for bass. Like a simplified way to think about it is like a lot of times people will split bass tracks and they'll have like the fundamental, like the low vanilla warm sound that will be relatively unprocessed, and you kind of like really saturate and grind up the mid range. But it's super easy to do that, but to like do that relative to other players is like really smart and pretty cool. That's an awesome thing. Probably to try experimenting with that later.
Yeah, well, there seems to be a million avenues to get to similar results. So that's what's kind of mind-blowing to me is like you can have an idea for the type of sound that you want to come out with, and there's so many ways to do it. And that's where I get completely lost in the choices of like, in what order do you do this, and how do you make the choice of what to use and when to use it and how to use it?
Yeah, it gets crazy complex. What's funny about the like saturation is, you know, all the old school mixer guys that were working 100% analog, you know, saturation was like something you tried to like be very cognizant of because it was coloring the sound and doing all this stuff. And now that everyone's in the digital domain, people are finding ways to use it. And now we have the ability to say, well, let's only use the saturation we like. Like you said, the multi-band saturation, which is literally, like you said, deciding which frequencies you want to saturate, which, you know, can give the illusion of more volume without turning stuff up. It adds these upper harmonics and all this crazy stuff. And so I always like, you know, when we talked to Jonathan Weiner, the mastering engineer on the other episode there, I wish I could like imagine experiencing that, like solving all these problems that you had, you know, 30 years ago in audio engineering, and you had like 5 tools. You had the board and like maybe a couple outboard pieces of gear, and then looking at kids today with 5,000 plugins and the ability to go in and do every little like detail that they want to do. And I was joking on that show that like I have 5,000 plugins and I'm only using like 5 of them, because you realize after a while that if you can't make those like 5 things do what you want to do, you probably need to go back and start reading books again on like how to actually operate this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine like making the records that we like learned growing up with 5 tools? It's like all done on the same desk, like the same EQ. It's crazy. Yeah.
And every bounce was a performance because they're automating manually. They got everyone's got a hand on a fader going up and down like that.
No, but hold on. But I just want to harken back to Nuno Betancourt, who in the Jonathan Weiner episode you should go back and listen to, walked in and asked this guy to master the record, but then pulled out his guitar amp and said, okay, cool, I'm just going to overdub some solos as he's mastering it live to 2-inch tape.
Sweet.
Like, what kind of world do you live in when that's happening? I mean, like, that's craziness.
It's stressful. But I think it is, that actually gives me an anxiety attack just thinking about it, because I'm pretty anal about like processing audio, like especially printing. You're committing stuff. But yeah, like learning the tools is so important. Like if you understand, like just speaking about saturation, I use that all the time, like, especially when doing all the sound design for the Starset sounds that we use live, is like if I didn't saturate stuff, that synth would be so abrasive and pokey, and the transient would like be annoying to hear. So you can like kind of tame things in certain ways and get them to sit with other elements better if you know how to squish them the right way.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. I'm trying to learn about some of that stuff now, and it's crazy how many parameters there are, and just internalizing that and figuring out, especially when you're dealing with so many other elements, how to make something fit in a live situation too, you know?
Yeah, and then when you have 6 other members, how does one work around that too?
Right. Yeah. Well, let me ask you, I mean, coming to you, you mentioned in the last episode that now you're getting around to building a studio, and maybe you can talk about some of your experience in recording or having produced things or doing your own projects. Like what sort of studio are you building? Like, what are you looking to do with it? Like, what are some things you've done in the past that you want to continue doing with the studio you're building?
Well, I definitely know that like the type of thing I want is basically a writing place. So it's not going to be a place where I would record drums. It's not going to have like super high, actually it's going to have pretty high ceilings, but it's not going to be a place where like I would build it for capturing live acoustic performances. I think what I want to do is have it to be a compositional spot. So it's going to be the ultimate playground. It'll look kind of like you with a million keyboards behind you, all my guitars. But I'm very careful, and I'm still talking to this acoustician about like the final blueprints we want to do, but it's the way to treat the room and the way I want it set up. So it's just going to, and then Brock built this amazing desk, by the way, which I'm sure you'll probably talk about later. But it's like, I need to get my desk and my
You're welcome.
Set up.
I take total credit for Brock building desk because he called me one day. Well, I was with Siobhán.
This was before his first desk, yeah.
Yeah, in Miami, and he was like, "You have a desk," which I have this desk right here, which cost me like $5,000. It sucks. It's an Office Max kind of desk, but it's basically because it has racks in it. And I had my C24 back in another lifetime. I had to get this specifically made desk, and I said basically as soon as it says studio in it, that it becomes 5 times more expensive than like if you went to Walmart and then just put a rack in it. Now, because Brock is has so much ingenuity, and he has so much machismo and bravado and that natural Leonardo da Vinci like wit, he's just like, I'll whittle my own desk out of oak and and make it all nut. So I sent him a picture. I drew a picture. I'm like, this would be ideal.
Yeah.
And the greatest thing in the entire world is he actually brought my vision in my brain to life. Like 2 months later, Siobhán sends me a picture, and it's literally Brock's desk, and it's like basically the same concept as what I drew, but like this beautiful piece of furniture. And I felt so happy. I was like a Jewish mom, like, oh my God, my vision came to life, and Brock is a 3D printer.
Yeah, that's awesome. I guess like same thing. Being in so many studios forever, I figured out some things of what I definitely wanted, but mostly what I don't want. So the way the desk layout, and I'm going to be so specific for where my monitor placement is in the room and all that. It gets super, super nerdy and kind of like aesthetic design at some point, but I'm really excited to do it, but it's mostly just going to be a layer that is for playing with synthesizers.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Is it going to be like attached to where you live, or is it a separate thing?
It's going to be separate. It's going to be so our garage right now is leaning, and we have to redo the garage. So basically we have this massive backyard, and I'm just going to build an extension off the garage as a totally new building.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I'm excited about it.
So wait,
Brock and I talk about this a lot. Go ahead.
Why aren't you going to do drums there? Because you don't have to have a studio, a Sound City Studios to have good sounding drums.
Better rooms for it. I think I want it to be mainly for writing and composing, and then if we have to track drums, I'll just rather do that elsewhere with like better preamps. And I don't want to like put in big sneaks and stuff, and I don't really plan on like having people come over to like do drums here.
You say that now.
Yeah, I know.
That's
but
funny.
But that makes sense because it depends on your wheelhouse, like what you want to do. I mean, every person
I say that because look, I have a bullshit ranch in Randolph, Massachusetts, and look, Cory can say he's saved things in so many different ways, and that I don't understand what a standing wave is. I get it, Cory, fine. But that said, like tons of people in my bullshit house say all the time how awesome these drums sound. And first off, it's because we have Paul Lorenzo, who's one of the greatest drummers, which it starts with good drums, good drumming, and then good drums and good mics. And I have all of those things, but I have a pretty bullshit room. So I just want you to understand that, like, part of writing, at least for me, having my own studio, and I understand because I had the same vision of you. That's why I don't have 2 bathrooms, and my fiance laments. She's like, what were you doing? Why are you almost 40 years old? You don't have 2 bathrooms. It's like, because I have a fucking non-parallel wall studio that's like, I spent sound design. But the point is that you could make it sound great. And for me, writing, being able to send a drummer over there and be able to do drums, even if it's at a simple thing, being limited by your preamps, saying someone else's preamps is better, that's stupid. I made things in a Digio 2 that I'm proud of.
Oh, I had a double it too. I think I'd rather, first of all, I love mixing much more than I love tracking. So I would rather have people send me things to mix than going, let's try that chorus again. Let's do those drums again. Let's do, like, it's just a whole different side of the music world that, like, my heart is much more in either, like,
well, that makes sense.
Capturing, so, but it's going to be a sweet spot to track guitars and basses and synths and all things like that, of course. But drums are a very specific thing. I think better rooms are suited for it.
Do you know what kind of monitors you're going to get? Because you said mixing, so that means to me that you're friends with Brock. And that means that maybe are you going to let him beat you with these giant focals, or are you going to fucking kick his ass?
Well, Brock and I want the same monitors that we'll probably have to sell a kidney for. Maybe we'll like team up and get one each. But
like the Aspergers or whatever.
ATCs. I really love them. I worked with them at NAMM, and they sound amazing. There's also a few other companies like, I think. I don't know. There's a couple ones, like there's like Dutch and Dutch or something like that make amazing monitors, and a lot of like these boutique European companies that are charging like 10 grand a speaker, and that's really what I need for my kick drum to sound the way I want.
Oh my gosh! Well, what was it that Jonathan Weiner had to say about monitors?
Oh yeah, he said basically you got to spend at least 8 grand. For the pair, otherwise he's like close but no cigar, which made me cry.
Like on the same side of the coin though, if you had like one of these mixers come and mix on like your focals, they'll make like an insane production. So you have to know your speakers, but I haven't really outgrown mine yet. I'm using Atoms and they're awesome, but I'd rather
which Atoms?
A7Xs. They're just like
cool.
I just know those things so well and put them in a million rooms. Yeah, like they're fun listening monitors and stuff like that. They sound great in the high end. They're not fatiguing, which when I'm like doing high gain guitars forever, that's something they definitely.
I find a perfect a combination of anxiety and depression actually is the best monitor for me, because it doesn't matter how bad my speakers are, I still hate everything. Whether you're putting it through Asperger's or a Martin Logan's or my Dyne Audios over here, it doesn't matter. I hate it on every one of those speakers. So the less I can hate it, like if I'm working towards how much does it not bother me. And that's why I'm actually pretty decent, is because I tweak things. I don't know anything that I'm doing. For example, a compressor to me is just spank or hard or wall. And then there's just like one fader, and I don't really know what it's doing. I don't know. Someone said there's a ratio. I don't know what that means. But I know that when I'm done, most people think that it sounds decent, and it's usually just a bounce.
I mean, that's literally the philosophy, the design philosophy behind the NS10s. Like, they're garbage speakers. They sound so bad. But if you can make your music sound good on them, then it'll translate everywhere. So, like, that's the same thing. You can just keep, like, without neutering it, but massage it until you don't hate it. It's a good thing.
With modern technology, I'll say one of my favorite things, since I have an okay room. Like I designed it to the right ratio I'm in a basement, but I actually built the dimensions to be the right ratio for the least amount of standing waves.
No, you really, I got treatment, as another nerd in the basement, you did, as a third party omniscient, Cory actually has a very well designed room with, if you look behind him, those back panels making the room non-parallel, also absorbing because they're filled with, it's very impressive.
Oh, thank you, Ben. But I still run into issues, sometimes with my low end and everything, just because it is a small room. So I actually figured out a way to do using Chrome Remote Desktop and audio movers. I can go out to my car and mix on my phone. And so I can check my low end. You know how you do your car test? I can do the car test while I'm mixing. It's the greatest thing ever for like getting that because I know what the car should sound like with that punch and the kick drum and everything. And I can sit there and dial it in. I come back into the studio and print the mix and send it off. And it's been the greatest like mix finisher I've come across.
Interesting.
I've definitely done let's bring down the bass 2 dB at like 150 and then run out to the car, test it. Oh, damn, that wasn't enough. Go back and like overkill it.
I feel like the paper cone speakers in a Honda Civic are actually better for me in my ears than Yamaha NS10s. They're equally unforgiving, but I know them better.
The car test is so important. That's like the number one thing is the car test. Yeah. But I want to try doing that. Like that'd be fun to be able to do it from the phone.
Because have you ever wanted to just like sweep a frequency, like just to find dude, do it. It's the greatest thing that's ever happened. I work in Pro Tools.
Okay.
Yeah, but you can do anything. You can just share the screen to your phone and then send the audio feed right to your. Half a second.
Okay, so like you drag it down, you can just wait a second, you hear it.
Yeah, it's completely manageable, especially if you're just trying to find that one like frequency that's driving you nuts. But like, you look like a maniac. You're sitting in your car like.
No, that's sweet.
My wife's like, I can hear you blasting the same song for 45 minutes in the driveway, just like playing with the kick drum.
Yes, that's another thing about like having a space outside of the house is I can, work on kick and snare at 2 in the morning. Not like
yes,
Wait, what is it's Chrome what? Like how do you cast it?
Chrome remote desktop. So if you have Google Chrome, you can just do the remote desktop. It takes like 2 seconds to set up, and you can access your computer. I can be at Ben's house, log into my computer from my phone, send an email with an attachment to my email, and then bring it up. It's insane. I'm not a huge tech like text when it comes to like Google and all these crazy shit.
Internet techie stuff.
But I saw like a post about someone doing it, and I was like, I'm gonna check that out. And then I like had this epiphany. I'm like, holy crap, I can get my kick to slam without blowing out my car speakers now. It's great.
Is that like the first time you realized you can plug your MT2 into your friend's MT2?
Oh my God. Yeah,
it's exactly like that.
I'm going to do that. That you're going to save me so much time. Of course, I should be doing that.
Yeah, hit me up if you need any more info.
That was my first. That was my first distortion box, and I actually loved it for years. I still plugged it in for years, and I thought that had such a relentless sound. And I stand behind it because Chuck Schuldiner of Death, may he rest in peace, was straight into the board like a gentleman with just an MT2 into the board.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome. That was my favorite. My first, not my favorite. God forbid. It was my first pedal too. Yeah, that's awesome. I'm going to definitely try that.
Yeah.
That's where it's
Well,
at.
I guess in the remaining time that we have, I mean, can we talk about some of the projects you are doing or plan to do outside of Starset, like, in between tours? I always think it's interesting to hear, like, even a lot of the fans ask this, like, what do you guys do when you're not on tour or doing Starset stuff? So tell our listeners about that.
Definitely going to finish this, epic build, which is, going to be awesome, especially like in the winter months when it's done, I'll be able to like write, which is going to be great. And then I have 2 big tasks ahead, which is one, contributing a bunch of ideas for Starset number 5. So I'm excited about that. And then I have to finish this damn solo record that has been sitting in various stages of completion for years. So I have all these ideas and starts, but I want to like finally formalize this thing and put out some of my own music, which will be instrumental and wild and eclectic. And I can't wait to share some of this stuff because I'm really proud of it so far.
Oh, that's awesome. So when did you start working on that?
I can't even, I don't know. It's like, I've always like, I've had hard drives full of song starts, like, oh, this is like a cool riff, or this is like a sweet melody, or like, I love this sound. How can I improve upon it? And then I move on to the next one and then don't think about it. So now
can I tell you, I'm sorry to interrupt for this. I think that's the most important sign for me of a serious songwriter is the ability to write all these awesome songs that at that moment you think is the most important thing. And once you get whatever idea out in whatever piece, you're like, fuck that, and just move on with your life. And you can have like literally albums and years worth of material like Prince or Van Halen, and then go back, like same thing we did with the Lost Symphony songs. I took songs from 25 years ago. I wrote 25 fucking years. I was like, and let's just do this song. It's the same thing that Dustin did with the new Breaking Benjamin song you guys did, right? Didn't he just took an old was it Downset you guys said?
Downplay.
Downplay. I conflate things. Sorry. Yeah, whatever. I can't remember my own name. But the fact is I think that's great. And when you say like, hey, I have all these starts and all, like people ask about Lost Symphony, the band that we're in, like when did it start? It started when I learned how to play piano. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I just think you have to be like, what helps is to have a way to capture it, and like don't be afraid. Now it's so easy to record, just record everything, and then try to like get that spark and capture that moment, and then for sure save it, and either return to it later when you're ready, like the next day, or just a year from now or whatever. But it's cool to go back and listen to it, because like one, you can see like I was a different person when I wrote that stuff, and you can hear like what I was listening to at that time, and like what I was into in that moment. So it was been fun to kind of like go back and sort of like compile of some like a piece and of like all these weird fragments of like my life and like where I was at the time, and then figuring out like how the hell did I play that.
Right. Yeah.
That's that. So that's been a big project I've been wanting to do for a while, and like really do kind of a proper solo release.
So how are you keeping everything organized? Like how are you going back and looking at these things? Have you been good with keeping them in some sort of order, or is it just kind of like chaos on a hard drive?
Yes and no. Of course, like I'm pretty good at like my folder organizations and stuff like that. So it's like I separate it by month and year, and then what instruments I was focusing on, and then moving forward. But then where I really mess up is my file names are like song idea 1, final 2, final 3, final. This is for sure final 1, and then test mix 2, bouncing 3, and like it just falls apart there. But like I have like chronologic good systems, and
I think that's mandatory for any like sound engineer or mixing engineer. Is like your naming convention always has to be like V1 mix 3 final, right, for real. Actually, I swear to God, this is the final one.
I promise.
I will say though, the thing that did help a ton, which was is having a good writing and mixing template. Like I just took the time and built it. So basically, if I have an idea, I'm ready to go, and everything's live. Like super easy to program drums, super easy to get the best guitar sound ever, just on the click of a button, and all my synths are live and pre-routed. So I can like
that made a lot of people angry, I'm sure, somewhere, to get all the best sound ever. George Lynch is sitting there like you think, motherfucker, you're just gonna pull that up on your fucking iPhone? Well, I got a 1960 Marshall JMP back here in my fingers.
Yeah, well, I mean, now we have plugins that like are so good. They're seriously so sweet. So it's easy for writing, and like I think the problem is, at least for me, I remember like trying to write a riff and then tweaking our tone too long, and then by the next thing you know, it's like it's 3 a.m. and I haven't gotten the idea out. So being able to like on the fly and like eliminate friction anywhere I can has been so helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let me ask, I mean, when it comes to writing, so like, let's say it's a day at home, you're not on tour, you're not doing something else. Like, what does your day look like? I mean, are you waking up with the idea of songwriting? Is it like you get an idea at a random time and you run into your space and try and log it? Like, how does that work for you?
So, I mean, the ideas come in varying times. I've had like recently, which hasn't happened in a long time, but I had like melodies in a dream, and I woke up and like frantically tried to like capture that thing again, which has been cool. But most of the time it's me like being not able to write or work, and like going to the grocery store and like humming into my phone the stupid kick pattern that I heard, or like something that's tweaking, going and like rattling in my brain, and then going to the computer and like trying to recreate it. But like waking up, you had your coffee. This is, this is very important, because nothing works until
essential.
And then I noodle, and it depends. Like some days, like if I'm like really trying to push for something, like when I'm doing like either like the writing for the next record or like my solo stuff, it's kind of structured where I'll be like, these 3 days are going to be guitar, and like these 2 days will be drums and bass or something. But most of the time I just kind of sit in front of the keyboard, and I like having my sounds live all the time. So if I sit down, I'm not like scrolling through and clicking stuff. It's like I can sit and play, and that's kind of always been like my inspiration. Also, like whatever, depending on what's up.
I was gonna say, how much of your day do you have to spend selling cocaine to be able to afford the ability to sit and just be like, I'm just gonna play guitar today for a little bit, and maybe a smattering of analog synth.
Yes. I mean, remember I did like run this company for a long time and like was a manager. So I saved
up a little. So you've saved really well to be able to like afford this lifestyle of awesomeness.
Right now, also like Starset's a big priority. So like I touring, and then when I come off touring, I try not to book myself too much time. Unlike Siobhán, where she like flies out and he does need to get.
Siobhán's a psychopath. She's like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm late. I was headlining Ultra with 80,000 people with Kygo. Have you heard of Kygo? And I'm like, I hate you. I literally hate you. She's like, I was also on the show called Queen's Gambit, and I told her like it's gonna be number one. And I remember saying, isn't it cool to be number one? And she was like, what?
Yeah. I mean, to be honest with you, it's depending on the project, it varies in terms of structure, but most of the time, like, especially like in our little break there, I tried to fill it with more traveling and then like think about the studio stuff more. But when I get like, I think the healthiest thing, especially like working on records before in the past, the worst thing to do is, for me, was just to leave it like an open schedule and like kind of do it whenever you felt like it. And then it would take way too long and you get distracted. I kind of like be pretty strict with that. Like from noon to 5, I'm going to be working on music and like be pretty regimented about and disciplined in that time. And that's helped a lot. Like that actually like makes me make deadlines. Otherwise I would just, never turn in anything or never hit save and finalize it.
Yeah. That's interesting.
That's the tough part. Yeah. I think that's the weird thing about, going or just doing a weird kind of creative job, especially if you're self-employed and working for yourself. I know that's something that I still like struggle with is finding like the balance to like bouncing between like my production clients, mixing jobs, getting this, like we have Lost Symphony, which is this like just basically never-ending project that always needs something done. But whereas right now we're waiting on certain things, so it's like it's in like limbo. But it's like I should set aside an hour or two to go through the mix and clean some stuff up. It's like, well, but I have a client that needs their mix tomorrow. I got to do that. And it's
he's like, but the flutes aren't comped on this one part, and if the trombone comes in and starts stepping on the second cello.
No, yeah, but just trying to balance all these things where especially where it's all on me. It's like if I don't plan it out correctly, there's no one's going to yell at me until everyone yells at me, because everyone's waiting on their mix or their production or stuff. And then I also have songs that I've written over my lifetime that I hear, yeah, solo record, that sounds great, and I go, when the fuck am I going to work on a solo record? Like, what kind of
what
asshole?
made you decide? If you guys go on to Cory's Instagram, he did a cover of Mario Brothers theme, which is
that was awesome.
Fucking
I didn't know
incredible.
That existed until the other day.
Because he just because one day Cory just decided to video himself. I was going to say tape himself, himself playing bass, drums, guitars, like doing all these things at once, and it sounds incredible. And it's like it's his own arrangement. It's not. It's way more in depth than the Nintendo version. It's very well thought out, perfectly edited, and that's what you put out to the world, Cory. Like that's your musical solo project.
You know what I did? You know when I did that? I did that in the month following me leaving my full-time job to do music full-time. that was 5 years ago. I recorded that thing, and since then I haven't had time to do anything else. That's why I reposted something from 5 years ago.
That's a high-class problem, dude.
Yeah,
the fact that you're so busy.
No, but that is a good point, because that's another slippery slope you can get into in music, is like you can totally saturate your life with when you have a talent or you're good at something, or people want something that you can do. It's really easy, like what I do, to just be like, all right, I'm going to fill up every free available day.
Say yes to everything.
To do something for someone else. And a balance is necessary, because I do need that for inspiration, for exposure to different types of performances, different types of music. I mean, that's kind of how I get new information, so it's super important. But at the same time, you can end up on the end of the spectrum that I'm at, which is like too much of that, to the point that I don't have the space in my brain to have the meditative time to let that coalesce into an idea.
Okay, Cory, a great question for you as a sound engineer, as a nerd. What's and I mean this in the highest praise. What's the greatest tip? I mean, we know that it differs all the time, but like, what's the tip that you can tell somebody that like always blows their mind? Like that you're like, oh wow, it's just Command plus puts the screen back on.
I think that tip would be to have templates that, like, so you're not setting up a session from scratch all the time. Like, I got frustrated with like making new tracks and then routing them to the buses and then setting up that killed me. So I love like a plug and play thing that helped me so much, and I was able to just churn out ideas, and just because like the gear was out of the way, like I was never thinking about how to set it up. It would just like focus on playing and how to play and what to play, and that's the coolest thing. So that's a tip that like blew my mind and changed a lot of stuff. Other than that, I would say have a good naming convention. You're gonna
right. Yeah, which we can all learn from that. Another question on top of that is, how do you prime yourself for songwriting or coming up with ideas? I'm not great at coming up with musical ideas, but if I have to write something like an essay or whatever, I feel like my ability to form sentences is way better when I read certain books, or, you know what I'm saying? So, like, are you just taking inspiration from things that you've listened to over the course of your life, or do you take time to like intentionally explore music by others or listen to things more frequently to get yourself in that mind space?
Definitely. I absolutely will like surround myself with music like that, relevant music, and then try playing that and like start building the sounds like that just to get in that headspace, because that's totally informs. Like if I get the right sound, it'll inform like what you're playing. So I think all that stuff is important, but I don't just like, it's kind of hard to switch gears abruptly. Like I need to like settle into it so I can be comfortable exploring the space. But I definitely prime myself by listening to that music like nonstop and absorbing it, and then I can kind of like play in that little arena for a while.
Interesting. Yeah, no, that's a good tip, because I've tried to be structured and sit down and be like, okay, today I'm going to come up with some sort of idea and sit at the piano, and then I
figured you out. I can tell you how Siobhán works. Siobhán works in the same way as if you start a sentence and then just have your auto finish or whatever. Because I'll send Siobhán ideas, like just a pulsing on the piano with like a lead melody.
Yeah.
And then she'll be like, okay, I don't like that lead. I'm going to change one note. Then she'll be like, okay, well, the rhythm on this, like maybe I'm going to change the time signature on this. Well, that one bass note's not it. And then the next thing you know, she's completely changed the song and written an entirely different song. But she thinks that she's pretty much just written a song with you. And for me, what I do is I deliberately write terrible songs with no rhythm, and I just pulse things, and I'll send it to Siobhán and be like, isn't this awesome? And I get all excited. And then she has to sit there, and it's like a book report for her that she's now fixing. So because she didn't start the book report, now she's just critiquing it. She has no problem going in and completely making it something fantastic. And that's how she works. But if it's a blank page, she's stifled.
That's very true.
Good point. I'm kind of the same way. It's much harder to start from scratch. But if I have the seed, I'm really good at improving or tweaking it. It's kind of easy and fun. Like that's like the producer role. That's the thing like that Dustin's so good at, is he starts from scratch all the time. And like that's hard for me. I gotta say, looking at a blank session or a template or canvas or whatever, that's like the first stroke, the first note. Where do you start? And you get like options paralysis. So I kind of, the best thing to do is just start throwing stuff at the wall.
There's only 8 notes, man. It's not that hard. Start.
But it is. I mean, especially, like if you don't even know, if you're developing your own style, you don't even know what genre you want to write in, or like for example, I'm taking a class and it's like, we're going to start a song process by writing a groove. And I'm like, I'm not a drummer. I don't even know what sort of, like, I don't know what it feels like to play drums. So it's so weird for me to start from that.
Can I give you the easiest way? Here's an awesome thing to do. So go and find the greatest song with the greatest groove and steal it, because rhythm is not copyrightable. So if you hear like Led Zeppelin, you're like, I love that groove. Take it exactly and then do whatever you want to it, because there's nothing they can do to you.
No, that's not a bad tip. I mean, I think, again, it's good to like prime yourself, so in this case, I'm like, okay, I'm going to look up songs in this genre and kind of listen and see like what's going on in this style, what are some common elements, and then have that sink in and then go in and approach it. But yeah, with absolutely nothing, it's hard.
Very. Oh, I have another pro tip.
Yes.
This is like this two kind of actually is one. If you're feeling like writer's block, I always jump to another instrument. Maybe like easier for some or harder on others, but like that always changes my ear and like my center of perspective for sure. Mm-hmm. Another thing is, I'm guilty of this on guitar, is I fall into the same shapes and patterns and habitual. Mm-hmm. So then what I do is totally throw the guitar in some way out, like alternate tuning.
Different tunings all day.
Different. And I love that. And I've written some of my favorite things because it forces you to use your ear and like really listen to what you're playing instead of just like falling into the same habits of riffs. And
that's interesting. Yeah, I've never done that on violin. And usually if I sit down to come up with any idea, it's always on piano, just because I feel like harmonies and chords are my home base. But that's a great tip. I've heard that from other people too, like great arrangers and songwriters. That's awesome.
I'll tell you, one of the greatest days of my life was Paul Lorenzo, the drummer in Lost Symphony, came over and he had a baritone ukulele and he goes, it's in drop slide A tuning. Like, what? He goes, yeah, it'll change your life.
Baritone ukulele.
And Frank, the bass player at our band, Cory, was in the evening with us. At one point, he was like, yeah, no, dude, drop baritone and drop A. It'll change your life. And I'm like, what? So I bought a baritone ukulele, tuned it to drop A, and it really did change my life to the point where I actually had a baritone ukulele, electric baritone ukulele made for me, which is the most useless instrument because it's essentially just a tenor guitar, which I didn't know this at the time, so I got punked. It's just a different scale. Yeah. But I learned how to play so many cool things, and then you find out Wes Borland from Limp Bizkit does the kind of same thing, and where I used to make fun of that guy, you go and watch him, and it's like, wow, that I guess. It's wild. It's wild stuff. So it's like, yeah, if you're bored playing a 6-string, just tune it differently. Or you know what? Take the top 2 strings off and be like the presidents of the United States of America and do something weird.
Yeah. I mean, like, I've written stuff I would have absolutely never been able to come out of me if I didn't just like jump into deep water like that. And it's cool because it kind of forces you to reapproach the instrument with fresh ears and eyes and like really listen. And you're really figuring it out almost for the first time again because none of your scales line up and your chord shapes don't work anymore. But it's cool because then you can like do really interesting things with open tunings and harmonics and like tapping, and yeah, it just opens up a whole new thing. So I encourage, like, don't be afraid to throw like a stringed instrument to go nuts. Or like I love like transposing things on different instruments. So if I wrote a guitar riff, take it on piano, or usually the other way around. If I write it on piano, try to figure it out on guitar. That's always really fun.
Yeah,
it's great advice.
So many tips, great tips.
I find a lot of the times when I learn things I play things on guitar and I go back to the piano, it then makes sense to me because like piano is what I learned on. So it's almost like, if I learned Spanish as a second language and then it's like, okay, I know what it means, but then I go back, I'm like, oh, it's just a C minor 7th arpeggio. That's why it sounds interesting, and it is cool because it's one of those things where it's like your brain's talking to itself, like both sides of your brain, when you're going from the guitar to the piano, because it's like, it's almost a different kind of feel to it. And not just that, things sound different on the piano than they do on the guitar, even if you're playing the exact same thing. So it can totally inspire you, or even just, slowing something down or speeding it up, like taking the same idea that you had and changing the feel completely. You know what I mean?
Or the time signature, yeah.
Oh my God.
Clapping on the one.
Oh, so that's cool. Like I'll do that a lot if I'm like programming drums. I will not be afraid to just like slide the whole like MIDI roll over and like displace it by like, a whole like quarter note. And then I'm like, whoa. And then kind of like following that rabbit hole a dozen more times. And the next thing you know, you have a riff that you would have never done just by.
That's how the Terminator 1 soundtrack was made. Do you know that? I think it's like in 1316. Oh, so the guy didn't realize that it was in such a weird time signature, the composer. And then they were going to do it to like an orchestra. They were doing like this whole compilation of different movie themes. So they asked him if he could write it out. And the guy like wasn't, I guess he was more of a synth guy. And he's like, what made you write it in 1316? And he didn't realize that he had done that. And it's because he was using a sampling machine in the early 80s. And it was off by like one sample. Cool. So basically he made this super jarring soundtrack that everyone knows is the Terminator 1 soundtrack, but it was literally because he fucked with the sampler and put in the wrong parameter.
Love that. Yeah, those happy accidents are so cool.
Happy, yeah. I love it. That's fucking great.
Terminator soundtrack, it's pretty gnarly. And then like other things that are cool to inspire you a lot is like watching other people's creative processes. So like figuring out how Hans Zimmer approaches a score blew my mind, and watching him like walk through a junkyard with a sampler and like a saw and like doing this stuff, and then shows how it makes it into like Interstellar and stuff like that. Like I love that. So trying to like deliberately get yourself outside of your comfort zone and habits has been a really cool tool.
Yeah, definitely.
On that note, just realizing that there are no rules, I think, is a big hurdle to overcome. Because when you're teaching yourself, you're listening to everyone giving you advice, whether you're asking for it or just looking it up online. You go, oh, well, the professionals do it this way, and they do it this way, and this guy does it this way, and I got to make sure that everything is, high passed or something. I got to do all this stuff, and then you see like the guys that are really doing it, and like, yeah, I'm walking through a junkyard banging on tin cans until I find something that sounds good. Or you like see some like the biggest mixers in the world going like, yeah, I found this old piece of shit gear on reverb and I plugged it in, it was distorting really great, so I just cranked it up and used that to like make noise. And you're like, oh, you just do what sounds good. That's what you're supposed to do. You're not supposed to think about all the other shit. I
think that's easier for me to say because I'm from like the maverick rock world where anything goes, like whatever sticks. But Siobhán, you're like classically trained where this is the right way and this is the wrong way to do it. So I wonder if like, do you have to find yourself like sometimes turning your back towards proper training?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Well, especially playing in a rock band and just like some of the ways that you have to approach the instrument to fit into that sonic landscape. I mean, there's a reason certain customs exist because there's like a good approach to making sound, and there's certain ways that are tried and true that it's important to borrow from. But yeah, I think it's also important to realize that like if you're able to attain a certain sound in a different way, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And if that's your sound, that's totally fine too. It doesn't have to have existed before. And we spend so much time in classical music emulating how other people do things and like emulating the style and emulating the performance and studying how other people did it. And there's so little about like, oh, well, how would you do this if you never heard this before? And I remember getting yelled at about like not knowing what certain like German words in music meant. Like if I didn't look it up, my teacher would like throw a book at me and be like, look this up and then we'll have a lesson. And I'm like, but you know what? I mean, yes, it's important, but at the same time, like what if something cool happened if I didn't know that before and I'm studying the music with my own ears and my own understanding of what I think it should be?
I bet you never forgot Allegro again.
Well, of course it's important, but really like that, it's the mentality that can be damaging of being reprimanded for not following something, and it's not an excuse to say like, oh, you shouldn't practice or you shouldn't do this. You definitely have to know how your instrument works and know how to produce a sound and understand why this works well and why that doesn't. But when it comes to the creative side of it, yeah, it's important to turn your back sometimes.
Yeah, if it sounds good to you, that's a good enough reason. That's it. That's all you need. Like if it makes you happy, that like use it. I have like a bunch of gear, like you said, that's broken, and I have pedals that are broken in just the right way, and they do a thing, and it's not supposed to be happening, but it's cool and I love it, so I'm just gonna use it.
Yeah, broken in just the right way. That's a good way of putting it.
But don't you find that there's a lot of people with like confidence that shouldn't have confidence though, Cory? Because like, I mean, look, you are obviously studious and like you take this serious, but we come now in a time where technology is not such there's not a high level of entrance to get to high level stuff. I mean, like back in the day, you had to have $1 million in an SSL board, and now it's like, you have an iMac and like a decent interface and a good microphone, you could make a Grammy Award winning record. So it's like, do you think that there's a lot of people who don't? Because I remember hearing somebody recently telling me that they loved almost everything. It's like, oh, I love everything I do. Like most of this, I'm pretty happy with most of the things that I do. And I'm like, I don't think I've ever done a single take where I've absolutely loved anything once in my life. Like, what do you think about like this confidence level of all these people that are doing backflips into technology now?
I mean, I can't really speak for them. I see a lot of people who have like unwavering and unshakable confidence that with like no merit at all. And but like these like SoundCloud rapper dudes, like they really believe it, and that's cool.
Oh, like, they believe they're in time. Yeah.
But I'm not that personally. Like I'm probably similar to you. It's like I'm really self-deprecating, and I'm unsure of what I'm doing a lot of the times. But you just sort of keep hacking at it until you're getting something that's like closer. This is like why I improved my mixes, because I was like frustrated with it until you carving away and baby steps and more iterations until it becomes tolerable, at least somewhat. And then you carry on.
That's a good way of putting it. Tolerable is what I aim for.
Well, hold on. Here's something else though. Cory, you need to find someone like your Cory. So like Cory for me. So he's Cory number 2 on this one. But like for me, I realized that I was doing well with when Cory would like message me back and be like, okay, I can use these tracks. I'd be like, oh, I sent him guitar track. He's not like, is there another DI track for this? I'm like, oh, fuck. I screwed up.
As long as you're not in trouble, it's okay.
Yeah, if Cory is like, I can work with this, I know that I've done a good job.
Yeah, what better feeling than that? Yeah. I remember that happened to me too. I remember the first time I sent guitar tracks over that I recorded remotely, and like he just like spit out some ideas, and I sent him over, and he was like, "Great, we're gonna keep it." And I was like, "What?" So, yeah, I just remember feeling like, "Wait, my tracks?" So yeah, it's a good feeling. That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, yeah, we're wrapping up part number 2. This has been awesome.
Yeah, Cory, thank you so much. This has been really fun. I was excited for you to come on the show, and I know that all the Starset fans will be thrilled that they get to complete the full interview series with all the various members of the band. And it's great to share your story and nerd out a bit on some technical stuff and studio stuff. And Yeah, it'll be great to see some of your outside of Starset projects, and we'll definitely share them on our end whenever they.
Can I
go ahead,
ask you, because you're so techno savvy and that you also play keyboards in the band. I feel like that you need to start doing stuff like Matt Bellamy with Muse, where you can, like, every time you play, that, like, the notes will trigger different, like, light stuff, so that in real time you're doing your own light show. Like, just think about it, man.
I built something like that.
I bet you did.
It's kind of, maybe we'll save this for like a future part 3 or something. But I built like multi-sensory composer instrument that was attached to, like, it was piano is attached to light pipes. When you played it lit up a structure that you stood in.
That's amazing.
It was with a team, but it was really, it was fun. But speaking of that, I would love to incorporate, and I know Dustin would too, is like being like very tech heavy and futuristic, to do some sort of like, unique instruments and unique lighting things and stuff like that. So I think that's probably in the future.
I'm sure it's in the works.
I was gonna say that has to be it, because like you have the biggest canvas to like to paint over this band with the technical side of like what you can do live, because your fingers trigger everything.
Yeah,
I mean,
lots of options.
I can't wait. Or like, I know Dustin teases it, but I think the coolest stuff is yet to come. So we're really wanting to make the show bigger and more immersive in every way. So yeah, stay tuned.
I want Middle C to be green.
Awesome. Well, listen, guys, good luck on the rest of the acoustic tour, and thanks for hanging with us. And hopefully we'll catch you again real soon. Check out your Instagram, which is very simple, at Cory Juba. Keeping it simple, spelling it Cory the correct way, Cory. And yeah, man.
Yeah, and come see us on tour. If anyone is out there and hasn't seen the acoustic show, we're on tour until mid-November.
It's CORYJUBA, because some other people might think it's like JEWBA. Oh, yeah. So like he's not one of us Jubas. He's just a Juba.
Thank you for clarifying. But yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is super fun. Hopefully we'll do it again sometime.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll definitely do some more episodes, and everyone will love it. And I'll let you know. Yeah, we'll share the links and everything. It'll be a hit.
Very cool. 2020-d.com. We'll see you next week.
Was the start of Starset intended as like an album first, or was the lore already kind of drafted? Like what was kind of the initial pitch? You referred to the whiteboard that you found. So what did that entail?
That was before the music. I think that was 2012. And I don't want to speak for him because I could totally butcher this, but like I just know from my outsider, like him telling me as a really good friend, he would bounce all these ideas off of me on late night phone calls, and we would just, because I was working, so he would call me later. And I just remembered talking about a lot of what he, how he envisioned this to be, and whether that was it never felt like marketing. It certainly never felt like anything but a wild idea. I just there was so much depth to the background of this whole thing. It's just, when you're talking to a crackhead that they're a crackhead. You just know, you're like, okay, this guy's like off his hinges, something's totally wrong. Like never did I get a feeling like you could put them side by side and him yelling about this story and then a crackhead. You could.